Hello and welcome to Adult Bible Studies. I'm Wayne Williams. This time of Bible study is a ministry of the Bluff United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. I started this series of adult Bible studies back during COVID when it was going so strongly and we were so concerned about being together, even in small groups. And this was offered as an option to people having to come to church to participate and to hear a Sunday school lesson. Since that time, the Sunday school classes have been able to resume their normal kind of getting together and having fellowship as well as studying together. And that certainly is the optimum kind of situation. And yet we have found that there are many shut-ins and others who are just not able to come to church and who are able to access this video on computers at home. And so I've continued doing this, and I hope it's meaningful to you. I pray that it's something that can be a benefit to you. Every once in a while, I'll get an email from folks from other states and that sort of thing. And so, when you put something out on the internet, it goes where it goes, and people can, doing searches under different topics and that sort of thing, will come upon it. And so if you're new to this study, to this site, we want to welcome you. We want you to feel like you're a part of things. These studies are based on the Cokesbury, which is a Methodist publishing house, the Cokesbury Adult Bible Study series of lessons in their spring edition. We're starting a new unit today. Units in our materials are based per month, and so this being the first Sunday in May, we're starting a new unit today. And this unit is going to focus on Sabbath, many different aspects of Sabbath. And today in particular, we're going to look at the command to honor the Sabbath and how this is something that God makes it very clear that he desires for us to do. And it's not just a mandate, it's a gift. It's something God gives to us. He gives us permission to take a break. Don't you love it? Take a break. Don't you love it when you're working hard and your supervisor comes around and taps you on the shoulder and say, "You're doing a great job today, but I think you just need to take a break for a minute and relax." God is doing that to us. He's tapping us on the shoulder and he's saying, "You're wonderful people. I love you. You're trying hard. You're doing good things. But once in a while, you need to stop and replenish your own batteries and to take a time of renewal." And that's what the Sabbath is to be. We're going to use as our primary text today the text from Exodus, where Moses comes down from Mount Sinai. He has the 10 Commandments that God has given to him, and he shares those with the people. And I'm going to just read verses 8 through 11 of that 20th chapter of Exodus. He says there, "Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. 6 days you may work and do all your tasks, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work on it, not you, your sons or daughters, your male or female servants, your animals, or the immigrant who is living with you. Because the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and everything that is in them in 6 days, but rested on the seventh day. This is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Sabbath. It's an idea. It's God. Moses is starting off here and introducing this by saying, "Remember the Sabbath day." The Sabbath day is something the Jews had practiced before, this idea of Sabbath rest, resting on the seventh day. But during their time in Egypt, while they were in slavery and in bondage, there was no Sabbath. There was no seventh day. Every day was the same as the day before. You worked until you couldn't work anymore. You went home. You may have eaten a light meal and gone to bed, and then you got up and did it all over again. Sounds a little bit like some of our lifestyles today, doesn't it? And yet we don't have any Egyptian taskmasters standing over us demanding that we do it. We do it to ourselves. The economy does it to it. The almighty dollar does it to it. Debt and other things. And I understand that. And I understand that some of that is beyond our control. And God understands that too. But God also understands just how important it is for us to have balance in our lives, to remember the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day and treat it as holy. Now, there's something very special when you call something holy, for only God is holy, and therefore only God can declare something as holy. And when God declares something as holy, it means it's distinct and unique and special and pure and all the things that it needs to be without any reservations. The Sabbath, the idea of Sabbath is a necessary thing. It's just like breathing air and drinking water and eating food. It's necessary for life. It's holy. It's a part of what keeps us going. 6 days you may work and do all your tasks. And God doesn't try to give a list of tasks here that he considers work, but he says, during those 6 days, be who you have been created to be. Be that person who's developed skills as a carpenter, as a plumber, as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a teacher, all those tasks that we perform every day. Be that person. Get out there and as a Christian, do a Christian type good job. Devote yourself to being the best you can be for those 6 days. And be sure that in those 6 days that you glorify God in all the things you do. And yet the seventh day, it calls for a different kind of relationship with God. It's holy. It's different. It's not just a day. It's a special day. It's a time that God himself has set aside and say, this is mine. God doesn't do that very often, does he? Basically, he created the world and he turned it over to humankind and he stepped back. And once in a while, he'll intercede in some ways to keep things in balance, but yet at the same time, pretty much things are allowed to progress in a natural sort of way. But he says here the Sabbath day is special. It's mine. Do not do any work on it. Oh my, there's one of those kind of phrases that you can generate 20 new denominations over discussing what does that mean. Do not do any work on it. What is work? What is defined as work? The Jewish leaders at this time and during working with the Jewish people, they had 39 different activities that they identified as work and therefore were prohibited activities to be done on the Sabbath day. That legalistic coulda, shoulda, woulda, must kind of living your life by rules and regulations and stuck into a regimen rather than into a relationship. God doesn't want. God wants our faithfulness. God wants us to honor Him by following the rules that He has given us to live by. But He doesn't want us to do that as a robot. He wants us to have ability to choose and to be who we are. And so, do not do any work on it. How do you interpret that? Well, like I said, the Jewish leaders came out with this list and they said, if you do any of these 39 things, you're breaking the Sabbath. That's a matter for you to search in your heart and with God. What are those things that renew you, refresh you, get you out of the hustle and bustle and chaos of your everyday life, and that renew you and fulfill you. I remember as a child, Sunday afternoon was a time when we visited relatives. What a radical idea! Get in the car, go to somebody else's house. Our mothers would get together and whip up something to eat. Nobody made a big deal out of it. It wasn't that the hostess of the home that we ended up at was responsible for providing this lavish spread. They just simply put things together, and we ate, and us children played, and the men and women talked, and it was a time to relax and reflect and to be together. Maybe I'm weird. I don't know. But I enjoyed that, and I miss that kind of fellowship. Fellowship is a part of honoring and being on the Sabbath day. It's a time when we can relate to people that we're not able to relate to in our normal ebb and flow of daily life. Those aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and people we went to school with and people we don't see very often. It's that time to intentionally gather, just as it's a time to gather as God's people in His house in worship. Work. What is work? One of those 39 rules may have been you can't drive your car on the Sabbath day. That's work. Look at all the things that would prohibit us from doing if we weren't able to transport ourselves from where we are to a new place, or to where we were with other people, or where we were able to relate to new things, where we were able to just go to the botanical gardens and walk through and look at the beautiful plants and the butterflies and the birds and just enjoy other people and being in a social setting. Well, we have to be careful with that, don't we? Do not do any work. And God says, I want you to be clear now. This doesn't apply to just you who feel like you're special. You religious leaders, you Sadducees, Pharisees, you uppity upper people of the world. This is to everybody. And He's broad enough here in the way He describes it to make it clear that this is something for everyone. He goes on and says, not uh, do not do any work on it, not you, your sons or daughters, your male or female servants, your animals, or the immigrant who is living with you. That's pretty all inclusive, isn't it? Everyone. Everyone is to observe this time of rest. Why? Because we're following the pattern that God set in creation itself, is the example that Genesis uses here. Just because the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything that is in them in 6 days, but rested on the seventh day. Why? Because this is a pattern that God Himself has set. And if God needs to rest on that seventh day, He's saying a part of that likeness of me, being created like me, is the need for rest. In Deuteronomy, we have a parallel text here to this Exodus text. And when in Deuteronomy, it uses a different rationale for why the Sabbath. Instead of referring back to the creation, it says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you up out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Why do you do this? You do it in a sense of honoring and respecting and remembering. Remember at the Lord's table when we take communion, we do it in remembrance of me. This is to be an act of remembrance. And it's not only to be an act of remembrance for those of us who are people of faith, it's to be an act that spreads that reality of our faith to other people by example. You know, the Jews had circumcision, they had their special days, they had Passover, they had all those festivals that they celebrated, things that made them a unique and distinct people where they worshiped God and brought attention to the fact that they were God's people. So likewise, you and I have the Sabbath day. When the Jews started after the Exodus and they started moving into other lands, a lot of people, I'm sure, pointed fingers at them and said, "Look at those crazy Jews. They don't work on the Sabbath like everybody else does." It was a way of bringing attention to the reality of God and to our desire to be His people. He has called us to be in Sabbath with Him, to be in rest with Him, to have that sense that, well, you know, sometimes when we work so hard, workaholics, I have fallen into the workaholicism, as I'm sure many other people have. I've known people who just could not break away from their work. Their mind was just constantly zoom, 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 zoom going, and it was just hard for them. As a counselor, as a therapist, these people often come to me and say, "I just can't sleep, I can't rest, I can't turn my brain off." It's a good indication that somewhere in our lives we're missing the whole point of this Sabbath rest. Teaching ourselves, programming ourselves, making it a habit, making it an internalized part of who we are, to rest, to draw aside, to let go of some of those things that are so all consuming those other 6 days, and give them time. How many times have you heard the saying, "I need to sleep on that"? I think that's an excellent example. When we sometimes have a problem and we just can't seem to deal with it, we'll say, "Let me sleep on that and we'll talk about it more tomorrow." And there is something miraculous that happens as we rest, as we sleep, isn't there? Oftentimes the next day we see the problem from a different angle, or with additional clarity, or with options that we didn't consider the day before. Because back in the background, our mind is processing those things, but nonetheless giving us the physical rest we need and not overwhelming us with just that task, as though nothing else matters. There's so much illness in our world, and certainly as now that I'm aging a little bit, uh, I'm realizing that you need to take care of this body. It's fragile. You need to guard your health. It's very precariously in a fine balance, all the chemicals and parts of our bodies and things. And a part of doing that is learning how to rest, learning how to let go. And another final point that I want to make in this lesson is, when we let go of those things of the world and we enjoy Sabbath, we also encounter God in a way that we don't encounter Him in any other way. Nothing is there between us anymore. My prayers are not just about, "Lord, help me with," or "Lord, uh, guide me," "Lord, give me insight," "Lord, help me to have wisdom." It's just, "Lord, how are you doing today? Lord, thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm sorry, God, but I've been so busy this week, I haven't taken a minute to just say thank you. And I want to thank you. all the rich blessing I have as your child. And rest, Sabbath rest, gives me the opportunity to do just that. I hope you can experience Sabbath. It's a commandment. God requires it. He wants you to do that. It is clear that is something He intended to be a part of our lives. And when we don't do that, we suffer consequences, natural consequences, all sorts of consequences. But it's not a commandment that's given to us in a sense of because I said so. It's given to us because I love you too much to let you just tear yourself down and use yourself up in the way you're going about life. Let go. Love God and receive His love in your heart and life. Sabbath. God bless you in this week ahead. I hope you have a wonderful